Greetings to you all, and you're welcome to this series that has been brought to you by the Forum for Women in Democracy. It is great to have you here, and I know that you have probably watched one of the other series, but in case you haven't, please go back and check, because like I said, it's a series, it's a story. So if this is where you're starting from, know that there's something you have missed. So please go back. This is a 5-part series, and we would like to encourage that you are watching it all so that you can have a whole experience of this podcast that has been brought to you by the Forum for Women in Democracy, which is a non-partisan feminist organization that was born in 1995. This year, FOWODE makes 30 years, or made 30 years. And if FOWODE was a woman, she would be a beautiful 30-year-old woman with a lot of promise and prospects. And today we bring to you a conversation around building the future, and looking at what we can do that is not deterred, that is very determined, even as we build an ecosystem that is gender sensitive in the upcoming elections. For those of you who may be watching us and are not aware, Uganda is right in the middle of a very ripe election process. We have been able to finalize a number of party primaries which had their own stories to tell and probably contextualize the reason we are having this conversation today. But also we will be having our presidential elections. We will be voting our members of parliament. It's going to be quite the season. And so it's important that we are having a conversation around how the elections are gender sensitive. And to further contextualize this, I'd like to introduce my guests for today. On my immediate left, I have Elizabeth Ampire, a sister and a friend. But away from that, it's important that you know that Elizabeth is the head of programs at the Forum for Women in Democracy. You are very much welcome, Elizabeth.
Thank you very much, Isabella.
You're welcome. And on my far left is another sister and friend, Helena Okiring Okecho, who is an independent process facilitator, but also has a rich background in the world of organizing, in the world of elections, in the world of governance. And I could not have wished to have a happier panel than the one that I have today. So you're very much welcome, ladies.
Thank you. And hello, everyone.
Yes. All right. So jumping right into the conversation, Elizabeth, would you like to contextualize for us so that we are sure that we're not going outside the designated area of what the Forum for Women in Democracy envisions as a gender-sensitive election process that we can then begin to have a conversation around building, towards. Over to you.
So for us at the Forum for Women in Democracy, we envision a gender-sensitive electoral process as one that allows equal participation and equal representation of both women and men. So that means that right from the start, from the voter registration process to the actual outcome process, we see a process that is free of violence, that has, respect for one another, especially to do with things with gender-based violence, but even the language itself, the framing of, the issues should be respectful both by the media, by the voters themselves, but also the Electoral Commission. So we see it as a situation where women and men can fairly compete in this process, so that the outcome is representative of the actual views that the citizens uphold to a free and fair election.
Okay. Thank you very much, Elizabeth. And I'm going to bring in Helena, and I'd like you to share some of your experiences as someone who has been part of this tumultuous environment, and in sharing your experience, I'd like you to look at some of the markers of insensitivity when it comes to how gendered the election process is, especially in light of what Elizabeth has said. Elizabeth talks about equal participation. She talks about an election process free of violence, an electoral process that is fair, And so looking at where you have come from You know, what are some of those markers that make the conversation we are having today very important?
All right. So, wow. So this is a walk down memory lane for me. So I first observed elections in 2011, and then observed as part of the Women's Situation Room 2016, and then for 2021 I wasn't as engaged. That was COVID. I mean, I took part, but I wasn't actively involved in the process. So from where I stand, if I were to plot along that trajectory, it's a mixed bag for me. Ideally, in a democracy as young as ours, we are growing. FOWODE is 30. Uganda's electoral process similarly is also one that's evolving. So ideally, the next election should be better than the last. If you look at election observer reports, if you look at reports from civil society, if you look at all these different actors and the feedback that they give, when you invest in improving your electoral process, ideally it should get better. So there are certain things that have been consistent. As to, for example, reports of election violence. I remember 2011, there were quite a number. 2016, violence, kidnaps, opposition leaders detained. As we head towards the polls in a few months, those are still some of the stories. So when you think about a gender inclusive process, for me, I'm thinking, what are the things that encourage all actors to take part in the process equitably? What does it take for women and men to participate? What does it take for ordinary people? This country is largely youthful. What are the things that bring young people to the polls? What are the things that encourage them to engage? Unfortunately, when I think of the process we're heading towards, when I listen to the news, either someone's being picked up, or the primaries were mad with the use of money, or there are stories of militarization. Even if you wanted to play your citizen duty of just being present for these processes, you also have an obligation to yourself. You have an obligation to your own safety. And so I fear we are creating a situations where citizens have to choose between being present for these processes and safeguarding their own lives. Think about a woman stuck in a situation where there's fracas going on. First of all, you're lining up behind a candidate. That in itself is risky. If you understand what that means for women, if you're lining up behind somebody your spouse does not support, not everybody has the capacity to stand their ground and say, no, this is who I support, and have that respected. So I feel like gradually, as opposed to making the process safer and inclusive, we are losing those safeguards, whether that is secret ballot, whether that is ensuring we're respecting human rights, whether that is minimizing the use of the military in the process, such that when you see the military getting involved, it's because things are extreme. But now that has been normalized. So I feel like we are in a position where we have to choose between our safety and our patriotic duty to vote. And when push comes to shove, if you think about women, if I have to think about protecting my life so that I can be there for my child, protecting my life so that I can be there for my home, the choices are very thin. It's very thin. So that's the energy for me around this electoral process. We want to be involved, but you take a step and then there's something makes your heart stop. Somebody was arrested. You're seeing it on your friend's statuses. So-and-so has gone missing. As we speak, we don't understand why Kizza Besigye is still being held. So how do you explain how are we going to the polls like that with these unexplained arrests, and then how do you tell women to come to a process like that, So for me, it's a mixed bag. looking back and looking now, what should be progress is progress deferred. Regression. Yeah.
Okay, thank you very much, Helena. And just to dwell a little more on that before we get into looking forward and coming back to Elizabeth. So in a situation where what Helena has said clearly challenges the possibility of an election free of violence, it's like the script that is being written is a violent script. The script that is being written is a script where there is no equality. It is very clear that in the script that we have right now, there is nothing functional. As an institution, how then do we have conversations? Is it safe to say that as an institution we are having conversations as if all is well? And how do you contextualize a conversation around gender sensitive elections in a situation that is skewed from the word go, in a situation where deciding whether to go to the polls or not is actually is a life and death situation. Where to go to the poll could be me choosing death, and staying home could be me choosing life. What does gender sensitivity look like in such a complex situation?
Well, I don't think we can clearly come up with mechanisms, because part of what's happening within the context, as we heard from Isabella, is beyond FOWODE, is beyond any citizen of this country. But nonetheless, we continue to, perform our cardinal role of civic engagement, making sure that the citizens are aware of this context, but also they look out for one another in this very difficult context. But we also continue to engage the media, to reshape the narrative around elections and the electoral process. And also as we encourage more women to, participate in leadership and participate in the electoral process, we make them aware of this and how to also build safety nets around themselves, because this is very important in the current context. So I wouldn't say we have a magic bullet to that, but it's really a combination of factors, and we continuously work with other actors within the sector to, just have these conversations around the context that we are operating in, but also devise mechanisms for navigating this very difficult context. Because we also can't come to a point where we say, okay, let us boycott this process. No, we need women's voices to be heard, even in this very difficult context. And we continue to encourage one another as we really navigate the space to ensure that we remain safe, we remain alive to see see the fruits of our sweat. Earlier, Ron said we are 30 years, but even at 30 years, we still have, a 34 representation in the national parliament. So that shows you that it's not yet uhuru. We still have a lot of work to do around getting women into these leadership spaces. And some of these barriers, we can only navigate them and ensure that, we get women into their space, but also look out for their safety while they are there.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you very much, Elizabeth. And coming to Helena, Elizabeth sets the context of giving up is not an option, in this situation.
Yeah.
It's a damned if we do, damned if we don't situation that we have. And so even in the midst of life and death, it seems like women need to show up, even if showing up could mean death. And so, okay, and as a moderator,
you don't want to die.
No, I don't want to die. I don't want to die, but also I don't think I have the courage to tell you to go out knowing you may die.
Well,
but coming to you, given that women cannot shy away, given that we as a people cannot shy away from the election, in your opinion, what are some of the strategies that can be used to increase support for women, for women's participation in the next election, so that we are able to build women's leadership beyond the 34%?
Okay, so for me, one of the ethos of FOWODE is leadership.
Yeah.
And at its core, leadership is about showing up when it's convenient and when it isn't. There have been moments, there have been glory days when the women are here, yay. Now, we are also at a time where, we have to show up. And I think it's okay to acknowledge the crisis we find ourselves in. It's okay to acknowledge our fears. We can be fearful. We can dread what's happening and still show up anyway. So I think for me, one of the ways we can show up, for example, there's been a growth in just online organizing. The number of, I think even just opportunities for women to gain leadership skills, to gain public speaking skills on different online platforms. I know FOWODE, I think, launched an online platform, right, that can help women to master these skills. In the evolving environment we are in, I think that's something powerful, because what it does is, yes, it addresses the leadership development needs for leaders within our context, but it also gives leaders an opportunity to connect beyond just our borders because face it or not, the crisis of democracy is not just in Uganda. It is a global problem. There is growing apathy, there is a resurgence of conservatism. All those things are happening. Democracy is in crisis worldwide. So even platforms that just present opportunities for women to connect, even in that crisis, for us to talk to one another and say, what are you doing? First of all, to acknowledge, like Liz said, the challenges we're in, but even in that, to still connect and say, what can we do within our limitations and within, because there's always something you can do. We always have a choice. So for a meeting of minds to happen, I think many of these platforms that are in place can catalyze that process so that we are still coming together, we are still having conversations, we are still creating change, we are still building solidarity networks. And I think technology is significant in empowering that, especially because Africa generally is a younger continent. So when you're talking about people participating in elections, when you're talking about people going to the polls, when you're talking about you're essentially talking about your young people. So even as we're talking about gender, we need to remember that. And some of the things that are working, not ideally, but there's something to build on, are things like technology, things like, there have been pathways created in these leadership development programs that we see. I think they now need to be adapted to the evolving environment we find ourselves in. If not because of the meta factors, the state and how it behaves, just also realities in how we work as NGOs. Donor pools are shrinking. We have to think about alternative sources. So that means even how we work has to be adapted to respond to those changes. So I think, who are the new actors? How do we leverage technology? I don't know that I'll die from sending a tweet, but at least I'm engaging. I will not have data.
But yes.
And of course we know here they'll switch things off, but people have found ways
to do it
around that. And while we still can, with acknowledging our challenges, acknowledging our fears, leaders must show up. We must show up.
Thank you very much, Helena. And speaking of showing up, one of the ways that FOWODE is showing up is through the development of advocacy tools, like Deterred Not Bad, which is a publication that that you use to drive accountability and change. Would you like to share with us, Elizabeth, more so that even the viewers can know how tools like that, publications like that, can be used to amplify women's leadership, but also amplify women showing up in contexts like this?
Okay, so Deterred Not Barred: Unmasking Violence Against Women in Elections. That's the title of that publication. And it really zooms into the electoral violence that was meted upon women as candidates, as voters, and as political electoral staff, like people who engaged in the electoral process. And it zooms into that violence that specifically happened in the 2016 general elections. And we see violence manifesting structurally at political level, but even at community level. And when we spoke to the women that were actually interviewed in that publication, you will see that some of the causes of this violence have actually deterred more women from participating in leadership. Hence the title, Deterred Not Barred. Because irrespective of that context, we still saw women come up. We also have women coming up for the 2026 general election. Although there is a lot of pessimism around it, people haven't given up. Women haven't given up in particular. And what publications like these and more that we do help us in, first is about generating the evidence that we then engage with at multiple levels. And these publications, of course, break the silence. You know, it is often said that violence thrives under the culture of silence. So every time we don't speak up, we are actually silencing fellow women from speaking up, because you're telling people, no, this is something that happens either in a domestic realm and shouldn't be brought to the public domain. So it breaks the silence about the violence that happens in communities, in households, in political parties. You can't imagine the magnitude of violence in political parties. Even in communities, there is the godfather syndrome, you know? Who is your actual godfather? Who is that influential person that can help you attain this political position that you're vying for? And actually, at that level, we see a lot of sexual violence that is happening at a godfather syndrome within political parties. It was actually rated at around 7% in that study. And of course, the majority of the women were saying the violence was psychological. So you have this partner, this spouse, who never allows you to, participate in trainings or go for community engagements. They are not beating you or anything, but that takes away your right to engage, but also to gain knowledge that would otherwise have, catalyzed your political campaign. So then the other thing that this study did for us is to inform the design of responsive programs or initiatives that then address violence against women in elections. Because, for example, we've been talking about men engage initiatives. But at this point, after we published the FOWODE study, we normally call it FOWODE. FOWODE is violence against women in elections. We found that, like I've said earlier, a lot of this violence happens, is male influence, should I say. There's a lot of patriarchy that is driving this violence, and therefore the main perpetrators of this violence are actually men. So how do we engage men? The godfathers need to be engaged, the spouses, the electoral staff themselves, to see how you integrate issues of violence against women in elections in whatever you are doing. In the design of the actual roadmap for elections, are we talking about this issue, or it is something that we are sweeping under the carpet? And then the study also informs reforms that need to happen, the legal reforms that need to happen. Because if you look at the current laws that we have around elections, but even violence itself, there is little mention about violence that is specifically happening around elections. So in that study, for example, there is a recommendation around integrating the 1325 UN Security Council Resolution 1325 in the current electoral laws that we have. There's also a recommendation around reviewing the Political Parties and Organizations Act to look at issues of commercialization of politics or electoral processes. You know that we were talking to some of the women that participated in the NRM primaries. And we as FOWODE supported some of these women in these primaries because we see them as transformative, and we feel that once they get into these spaces, they'll be able to push the gender agenda. But one of them, as we're reaching out to, check how they performed in the primaries, one of them that didn't get the party card told us that she needed 100 million shillings in that last week for her to compete favorably. So we come back to the question of how many women can actually raise 100 million shillings to be spent in 1 week alone. Even if it was a month, there are very few that can raise that. We know that the ownership of productive resources in this country is dominated by men, and most women are actually not creditworthy because of that. They can't access loans. But also these processes leave a lot of women in debt. And they are forced, to sell even the little assets that they have accumulated just to pay off this debt. So evidence like this informs engagement around those legal reforms that need to happen if we are to have a gender-sensitive electoral process that we started with at the beginning. And then this study also informed the need for the review of the actual electoral system itself. Because currently, the system that we run as a country is the winner takes it all. So the study actually recommends proportional representation. That how can we come to a compromise where there is power sharing, for example, so that it's not a do or die for many people, because that is what it appears to be. I think you saw in the SEC elections, chairs flying, and actually one of the legislators raised the issue on the floor of Parliament and wanted the speaker to comment or respond to that, which she, of course, eluded. And we see that unless this is, addressed through a review of the electoral system that we currently run, we are likely to see people killing each other even before the cameras, because that is what was happening at Kololo. You saw some people hospitalized shortly after that election. So we ask ourselves, how many women are willing to be hospitalized because of an electoral, process? And these are the things that continue to deter women. We know that Uganda has signed on to the Sustainable Development Goals that talk about, and goal number 5 is about achievement of gender equality and empowering of all women and girls. And such frameworks have also informed, national level programs and policies. But this cannot be attained if, things like violence against women in elections are not addressed, in a very strategic and sustainable way. Because even now, as we prepare for the 2026 general elections, women like whom you would expect to be, eager about this process, even just as voters, by the way, not just aspirants, are seeking to, boycott the elections. And what is the reason they are giving? It is violence. I'm not ready to risk my life. I'm not ready to do this. And I think as a country, we need to come back to that reflective stage whereby we have conversations such as this, and we pave a way forward to say, let us address some of these issues if we are to really realize the aspirations that we have at national and global level.
Okay. Thank you very much, Elizabeth. And Elizabeth speaks about the study and the fact that it enables us collect data and to be able to inform strategies that we ultimately take on, but Elizabeth also talks strongly about the fact that there has to be a certain level of will, with the holders of power. As a feminist organization here, we then begin to interrogate power dynamics. And so within the ecosystem of power, Helena, one is, how do you envision that government, which is the power holder in this context, would be able to work with entities like FOWODE and other entities that are doing the important work around women's inclusion to ensure that the electoral process is more gender sensitive. And it's an interesting conversation because we know that the perpetrators of violence are the same entity that we are now saying, acknowledging has the power and seemingly needs to work with us. It's like we are caught up in a catch-22. But yes.
So there was a platform I was part of in my heydays, my 30s. And there was a publication they used to run called Reality Check. And so, again, going back to looking back from where we've come to where we are, I think for me that reflection is important to answer that question about plausible partnerships. Does the state want to work with democracy-seeking actors? Ideally, but what does the evidence say? So if you look at how many organizations, for example, were accredited to observe elections, again, 2011, how many were accredited to observe 2016?
What happened with them?
What happened to them? And then how many were accredited to observe 2021? If you study those trajectories, what are the numbers? What's the data telling us? How many women's organizations over the last, say, 5-10 years? If you look at, think of, because FOWODE is part of an ecosystem. We shouldn't lie to ourselves, sit here and say, FOWODE is 30, so we can just go and swear our hair and see how else to build a future. No, we are part of an ecosystem. Women thrive in community. Women's organizations, women's organizing, feminist organizing is interlinked. So if you ask yourself, how many organizations, for example, in 2016, women's organizations were speaking about violence against women, engaging women in the electoral process? How many are doing so now? And what are the reasons fewer actors are able to speak out? What's happening? Why are the voices becoming more and more loner, for lack of a better word? So for me, that reality check will help us appreciate the environment we are in. Is there credible evidence that the state wants to work with organizations, be they feminist, be they women's rights organizers? Is there evidence? And what does the data tell us? And then what do you do with those findings? Because ideally we want to partner with them. Those are nice things to say. But when you have NGOs being run down, you have NGOs being closed, you have NGO leaders, you saw what happened. If you look around now, there's very few, for example, civil society actors in the space speaking. And of course, there are different reasons. The state hasn't been responsible for all of them. We can argue and say we've been responsible for some of these things. But you also cannot underestimate the role of the state in providing an environment for actors like civil society, political parties to thrive, all of whom contribute to building healthier democratic cultures, whether that's a culture that resists violence against women in elections. Some of these evils are because of the darkness of the absence of state accountability. Where you have healthy political cultures, women should not have to use their bodies to get political favors. It should be enough that they are credible. It should be enough that they are competent. It should actually be enough that you just want to make a contribution. You shouldn't need 10 million shillings. We're talking about 100 million. You should not need 10 million. You shouldn't, in a healthy society. But the fact that we've weaponized money, we've weaponized women's bodies, we've weaponized dissent, we've weaponized literally everything. That means even how you come to the conversation must be, we must have sober conversations where you run the risk of being shut down because you are speaking about something. How do you organize? Where we have normalized violence. Sometimes I look at the updates, and I think it was yesterday, I saw an update, and then I scrolled, but I didn't know what to do, because how many sorries can you say? How many press conferences can you have before you realize, guys, the state is not interested
Not at all.
in building a strong and vibrant democracy? What does that mean for us, for Forum for Women in democracy? What does that mean for us? What does that mean for how we organize young women? What does that mean? And just being humble enough to admit what that means and then engaging with it. It's okay to say maybe women need to go for military training. I think it's okay. It's perfectly fine because of the circumstances we are in. It's a powerful, clearly, in our time, it's a very, for you to hold the gun, it looks like that's where it's going.
Yes.
So it's okay. Let women go and learn these skills. Let them also learn how to be generals. That's what we've been dragged back. Is it ideal? No, it's not.
But
if you're thinking about survival, if you need 100 million, where are you going to get that one? Afazali, you learn how to hold a gun.
Maybe you will find a random bush.
That's the power you will have.
Find a random bush in...
I'm talking about it, but it is very sad. It's not even something I am rejoicing in. It's heartbreaking to have to make those kinds of confessions. When you look at the people who are being promoted, when you look at UPD, I looked at the UPDF referral hospital in Mbuya. It would be nice if you had something like that
as a public facility.
Exactly. Yeah.
But
so
we don't.
Obviously, that's where power is. So sadly, what is the reality we have to contend with? And when violence has been institutionalized, because that's what has happened now. That's why we are comfortable detaining people without trial for this long. And there's literally nothing you can do about it,
Okay.
Thank
you very much, Helena. At this point, I believe we are due for a much-needed break from the conversation, but I hope that you'll be back right after this short message. Forum for Women in Democracy is a Uganda women's rights organization whose vision is a society where women and men in the public and private share equally in decision making. To achieve our vision, FOWODE is establishing a center, the Imara Women's Center, a place we shall call home. The center, which will sit on 2.3 acres of land, will offer women and girls a sanctuary of learning, sharing, and common purpose. It will facilitate women's own independent voice and strengthen women's leadership and networking and enable creativity and innovation. It will be a space for rejuvenation, reflection, nurturing, healing, and much needed self-care. On our own, it is not possible for us to fund this dream, but as a collective, we can. There are many ways you can support and contribute to this effort. Do it for yourself, your mother, sister, wife, daughter, or grandmother that you wish to celebrate. We are exploring all options from small individual and regular donations to large and sustained partnerships with each of you. You can give as little as 10,000 shillings per month over the next 1 or 2 years. Share about the center on your different social media platforms and link us to your networks. To support us, send your contribution to the contacts below. Join us and let us imagine Imara together. Welcome back from the break. I hope it was helpful. I hope you grabbed yourself a cup of tea and a cup of coffee to be able to continue with this conversation. So please take your seat and let's dive right back in. Yes. So coming to the last part of this conversation, which I have thoroughly enjoyed, I would like to ask Elizabeth to speak about the young leaders. FOWODE has over 1,000 young leaders who have been trained through your alternative transformative leadership program, which I think all of us have as if been part of in one way or the other. And this is fertile ground for alternative leadership in the context that we are in. Would you like to walk us through how you're mentoring these young women and preparing them for a bold, value-based leadership within the context of our current political landscape? Over to you, Elizabeth.
Thank you, Bella. So our view of this context that we see, of course, we try to ask ourselves where the savior is coming from. And we all know that Uganda is a relatively young population. We have over 78% young people that are below 30 years of age. So as FOWODE, we know that if we are to harness the demographic dividend, then we need to target young people, prepare their minds, but most importantly, to occupy these leadership spaces so that, their voices are part of what is shaping decisions in this country. So as an organization, we usually tap young women that are between ages 18 to 30, and they are brought together in a camp whereby their skills are built on multiple issues, but mainly to prepare them for the context that is happening now. So they are skilled in public speaking, they are told about the making of Uganda, they are skilled on how to do effective advocacy. Role models are brought to them so that they are able to interact with seasoned women leaders that have done this before, have navigated that space, and have been able to influence some of the transformative policies and programs that we see today. But most importantly also is about self-preservation in this context. How do you preserve yourself? How do you build alliances and networks with like-minded people who then serve as your safety net when push comes to shove? So as we do all this, the aim is about building a pipeline of transformative women leaders, because we acknowledge that a time comes whereby this seasoned woman leader has to seed space for the upcoming young woman. So is this woman actually prepared to occupy that space? Are they ready? Do they have the skills? Do they have the tools that they need? So as we do all this, we are looking at, linking them to role models, like I earlier said, and also empowering them for their own survival and thriving in this context. Because we all know that for you to navigate the current context, you need to be confident, you need to have the right skills, the right information, you need to be able to do, for example, budget analysis. When you look at some of the most admired legislators that we have in Parliament currently, people like, I won't mention names because the names that come to mind. This is
where we have reached.
The names that come to mind. The names that come to mind are men, mainly. So if you're to watch most of the parliamentary debates, as an example, you'll find that the people that we see as role models are actually men. But we are saying, no, we need a 50-50 representation. So we can only attain that if we empower these young women to be able to step into that space and, make those, leave a footprint that then reshapes the narrative around women's leadership. But also we've been told by the women leaders that we, train periodically, that parliament is full of vouchers, vouchers in all forms, sexual violence, all these things. And violence has been, women's bodies have been weaponized, like Helena said earlier, whereby you get into parliament, you're naive, and you're a target by these men that have been in parliament for a long period of time. So these young women leaders need to be equipped with this kind of information, but also the skills to survive and thrive within these different spheres of leadership, where we expect them to, of course, center the priorities of women and girls in all policy and decision-making spaces. And once they get there, it is also important for them to know how to effectively legislate. How do you become an effective legislator? And you'll find that research is a key component if you're to really be a respected and effective legislator. And sometimes you don't have the resources to do this research. And that is where the networking, the solidarity building with organizations like FOWODE, like UONET, like-minded organizations that are actually strengthening women's leadership and are, invested into amplifying the voices of women and girls. That's how we come into partnership with these leaders to, furnish them with this data, the evidence that they need to actually perform their legislative role effectively. So this mentorship goes beyond the actual training to supporting them throughout their leadership journey. And we've had female legislators that joined forward as, councillors at district, sub-county level. We've seen them rise to ranks, through the ranks to become, for example, the first leader of opposition, the first female leader of opposition in parliament was a FOWODE alumni. So we have several of such examples, and we hope that, as we work with these young women, we are not only equipping them with the skills for now, but we are actually shaping an eco-future together.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Elizabeth. And Elizabeth puts us on the journey to hope. And so let's come to Helena with our final question for today's podcast. Your submissions, your previous submissions were, should I say, governance slaps, for anyone who was not fully aware, you were able to paint a very interesting picture. But also it was a reawakening for anyone who had taken a pill and said, I'm not going to pay attention. But within all that, I still believe that hope is the last thing we should lose. So where is the hope in this whole conversation? And Elizabeth has already talked about the young women, but yes, please carry on.
So brokenness in its different forms, broken governance systems, societies, has been part of human existence for the longest time. People will always find themselves in broken situations that require them to look deep within themselves and then rebuild something new. So for us as Ugandans, women, men, generally anyone in this country who has a stake or who wants to have a stake, that answer has to come from us. You have to find, we are all we have. Let me actually just say that. We are what we have. Broken, apathetic, disillusioned, we are what we have. And it is possible to feel the way we feel as a country and still do something. It is possible to feel discouraged, broken, and still organize to create impact, all right? So I think for me, we have acknowledged where we are. And now I want to implore everybody listening to find time to reflect and ask yourself, what is going to be the cost of rebuilding this country? And what is my contribution to that? For some, it may be higher than others, but that's because of where society has placed you. If you find yourself heading a leadership program, you have been given much. From you, much is required. If you find yourself being a mother, encouraging your sons to respect their sisters, encouraging your daughters to run for office in schools, if that's what you can do where you are, do that. But whatever and wherever you find yourself, do something. That's what I would say. And like you said, Bella, don't allow hope to die, because I think that's the actual defeat. The defeat is not losing the election. The defeat, it's when that ember of hope in you is snuffed out. That's when it's lost. For as long as things are happening the way they're happening, but we stay hopeful, we stay in community, we self-preserve, we look out for each other, we still believe in ourselves as Ugandans, I believe we'll find a way. And by the way, this is not to say people are not actually doing things. There are people who are doing interesting things outside this system that are holding this society together. You know, whether it's the people who come up with drives to raise money for people to go for heart transplants. Yes, the healthcare system has failed. That's an indictment on healthcare governance, gone completely wrong. But people still come together. So what else can we come together around? It's not ideal. It's not what it should be. But again, the foundations are broken. So you have to work around that brokenness so that we are alive and so that we can find something to do together. So you are the hope. Bella, Liz, everybody here, it's on us, really. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Helena. Thank you very much, Elizabeth, for sparing time to come and share with us on how we are building. It's a very important conversation on how we are building the future at a time when everyone seems to be on their last doses of hope. You know, the reminder is that those embers cannot die. Okay, so we must collect from all the hope baskets that we have and rebuild.
Scrap if you have.
Scrap if you want, but we must build the future. And like Elizabeth said, you might be deterred, but may we all not be bad. Thank you very much for watching, and have yourselves a lovely time at whatever hour it is in your sitting room, on your laptop, in your country. Yes, thank you very much for watching. From us to you, cheers. Forum for Women in Democracy is a Uganda women's rights organization whose vision is a society where women and men in the public and private share equally in decision making. To achieve our vision, FOWODE is establishing a center, the Imara Women's Center, a place we shall call home. The center, which will sit on 2.3 acres of land, will offer women and girls a sanctuary of learning, sharing, and common purpose. It will facilitate women's own independent voice and strengthen women's leadership and networking, and enable creativity and innovation. It will be a space for rejuvenation, reflection, nurturing, healing, and much needed self-care. On our own, it is not possible for us to fund this dream, but as a collective, we can. There are many ways you can support and contribute to this effort. Do it for yourself, your mother, sister, wife, daughter, or grandmother that you wish to celebrate. We are exploring all options, from small individual and regular donations to large and sustained partnerships with each of you. You can give as little as 10,000 shillings per month over the next 1 or 2 years. Share about the center on your different social media platforms and link us to your networks. To support us, Send your contribution to the contacts below. Join us and let us imagine Imara together.